What was the Berlin Conference?
The Berlin Conference was the partitioning of Africa from 1884 to 1885, I believe.
Right. So the abolition, the so-called Berlin Conference, and its structure actually went from about 1885 to around about 1914. But I am telling you, what happened, because you took individual slaves into your country and then you sought to free them. However, 50 years later, you went into Africa, and completely reshaped all of Africa with arms, with terror, and with deceit.
You're a conspiracy theorist, so you got your receipts now, yeah?
Well, it's not so much receipts, but like I want to show you how language is important and how also you must look at what someone does as opposed to what they say. Okay, so it's going to seem like a leap, but I just want you to just follow me just for 5 minutes. Okay, when was slavery ended? What's this got to do with Ukraine? Just follow me for a second.
In the mid to late 1800s.
Okay, let me just say the so-called Abolition of Slavery Act was 1834.
1834.
That was the abolition. That was the Abolition of Slavery Act was 1834. It didn't end there, but the point is that's when that act was put in.
Yeah.
When you speak to people today about racism and so on and so forth, what do they say? People who really don't understand.
It's not as bad as it used to be.
And slavery ended
in the mid 1800s.
Well, that's not what they say. They say it ended a long time ago.
Ended a long time ago, yeah.
Right. So we know then that the Abolition of Slavery Act took place. Yes or no?
Yes.
Great. Yeah. And so you would say then by the end of the 18th century, black people should be standing on their feet and doing what they should, doing what they need to go forward. Yes or no?
No.
Why?
Because just because you end slavery doesn't mean that the psychology of slavery is ended.
You damn well. No, it's even more than that. You see, the thing is, even someone as bright as yourself still don't see it. Now, you may say this has nothing to do with Ukraine. I'm saying that Ukraine, Russia and all of these countries that have been reshaped just during the last 25, 30 years, it's part of a reshaping of the globe. But I'm trying to show you that this reshaping of the globe is not new. It's part of a modus operandi.
Right.
So on one hand, it seems as if you're being given something,
freedom.
Freedom. I'm not sure how another man can give you freedom, but yeah, you're being given your so-called freedom.
Right.
On the other hand, you're being enslaved. So those people who were taken out of Africa of the time, and they were brought to many of these different countries in the world. In the world, they say that those people who now live amongst them. It wasn't always the case. They now say that there's some degree of equality. This is what they say.
Yeah.
And this equality for many black people, I know for me, has only really come about the last 15, 20 years or so.
Right.
Yeah, first part of my life was nonsense. So the country was racist.
Sounds like victimhood mentality to me.
Well, let's see if I am being a victim, and let's see whether or not this is part of an old trick that's happened.
Right.
What was the Berlin Conference?
The Berlin Conference was the partitioning of Africa from 1884 to 1885, I believe.
Right. So the abolition, the so-called Berlin Conference, and its structure actually went from about 1885 to around about 1914. But I am telling you, what happened, because you took individual slaves into your country and then you sought to free them. However, 50 years later, you went into Africa, and completely reshaped all of Africa with arms, with terror, and with deceit. So here's a mind. Let's play a mind game for a moment. Let's play a mind game, for example.
The conspiracy theorist mind game.
Right. What was British East Africa? Which country is recent?
Kenya.
Right. Stop a second.
All right, go on.
What was the German colony of Togoland?
That was Togo.
It's modern Togo, absolutely.
Congo,
yeah.
isn't it?
So we know that British forces invaded Germany, but not Germany. They invaded German Cameroon. Yeah.
Yes.
This is during this time.
Yes.
What for?
For colonization, for
control of resources.
Yeah, for resources.
Yeah. Hold on a second. But in German Southwest Africa, what was that called?
German Southwest Africa.
Is modern Namibia.
Right,
You understand?
okay.
You had German East Africa. You had French West Africa. Do you understand? You had Spanish. Yeah? All of these countries, European countries, that were rulers of the slave trade, all of them, the Portuguese, the murderous Portuguese, the disgusting Belgians, the disgusting Belgians, all of them sat down in a conference and divided up Africa. Every single last one of them, even today, French controls the economies of 15
African nations.
African nations.
Yeah.
So think about this. You're saying that you look at Ukraine and you say, "Oh, this is very, very different." Actually, it's not. It's the reshaping, in the eyes of the status quo, of the powerful, the world, in how we wish to see it. And so you have black people today who will tell you that, okay, we had Jamaican independence the other day. From whom? Nigeria's independence the other day. From whom? The Congo, the whole of Africa. So you removed black people, said you freed them, and those black people who lived in your countries, you then went back into a continent 50 years and enslaved the whole continent. Yeah, this is what's happening. Now, you say, well, how does that compare with what's happening today? All of these countries, who are now in NATO have given up or have had taken their ability to act independently.
So no sovereignty.
There is no sovereignty amongst them at all.
Sovereignty.
No matter what they tell you, there is no sovereignty. But who rules them? Yeah, who is at the head of that part?
America.
And I think this is important. People say, "Oh well, this is nonsense. It doesn't make any sense." Listen, it's the reshaping of the world in the image of people, who have always controlled it. Yeah, New Zealand. Look at Australia. Australia today is a glorified American military base. Yeah, they've just agreed to.
Well, it was a British prison before.
Well, it was. It was, but it's a glorified military base. They've just agreed to spend another 140 billion, in order to counter the threat of China. These people stupid. If China cuts off trade with Australia, they're finished. What do you think's going to happen? That they're going to trade with Britain and America? And so you want a loaf of bread? To go from the equivalent of $1 to $5. How do you then listen? They need China in order to survive, despite what people have told. They spent 140 billion. You've got Japan, who were destroyed in the Second World War. Bombs dropped on
Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Their emperor. Their emperor completely.
I like the way you're testing mine as well. Because I've got it all here, but it's like you're firing at me.
You better. Yeah. You've got Japan completely destroyed. Their constitution rewritten by the Chinese.
Whose constitution?
The Japanese constitution.
It was written by America.
It was written by America and Americans, and so on and so forth. And so one of the conditions is that they wouldn't have a military. They had to become demilitarized. However, because of now the impending confrontation with China, because they're now pointing out China is a terrible guy. I'm not trying to be, if you don't understand history, the behavior of the Japanese in the Second World War, and prior to the Second World War, and how they treated their neighbors was an absolute disgrace. And whilst I don't agree with the dropping of the bomb bombs on Japan, there are many people in that region that did. I could never support that.
That's too much. Definitely.
By the way, and so Japan now, the brakes have been taken off of Japan, and what has happened? Do you want me to tell you what's happened? The third highest spender on arms is now who?
Japan.
It's Japan, The country which has the most military bases, US military bases
on its
soil is who?
Japan.
Thank you very much. And so the world is being reshaped. People in Philippines have been terrified now because of the actions, what they say, of China. within the South China
Can we break
Sea.
down this military base thing just quickly? Because a lot of people maybe don't understand how significant military bases on people's soil are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you just said that Japan has the most US military bases
Of any country.
any country
Yes.
on their soil.
Yes.
What does that mean?
It literally means this, that they can project power across that region.
Who, the US can?
The US stroke NATO can project power across that region, and they have done so. They have done so regarding Taiwan. They have done so regarding Korea. They have done so regarding Vietnam, Cambodia, and so on. They've projected power in China. Across that entire region. If you look at the moment, the Taiwanese, who, by the way, are ethnic Chinese. What's interesting about that is the fact that Taiwan has emerged as a power within their own right. In fact, I'll go further and say that Taiwan today has the world's 6th largest cash reserves on the planet. Of course, they make the chips which power literally the modern world. In Taiwan, but Taiwan is very frightened at the moment. In fact, Taiwan have increased their military spending last year by a further 9 billion. Now, where's this 9 billion going to? Which companies is it going to? Do you think
the tech companies, isn't it?
Well, it's going to American defense manufacturers.
Right.
Yeah, this is who it's going to, and they spent an extra 9 billion. So you're going to have an extra 9 billion sent by Taiwan on top of the money that's being spent. You've got 140 billion, which are extra monies, which is being spent by the Australians. The Filipinos have increased their budget. Do you understand? The whole region is in terror at the moment at what is impending. And the very weird thing is that when we were young and we were more susceptible to propaganda, we used to see America as a source for good on this planet. And that is not what's, with respect, Sarah, that is not how we see America now.
You sound like an American hater.
No. You see, the thing is that no, I'm not an American hater at all. In fact, I love, 96% of my family in America. Of course, I'm not an American hater. I'm an injustice hater. And the thing is that America wants the status quo to remain the same, but they don't understand that, as I said to you, that there are peer competitors which are coming up. As I said, China's one. China has this world up until around about 2050, 2060, and then it's going to be the late 21st century is going to be India's time to rise, just by virtue of the fact that they're having so many children, they're breeding, and they're building a very serious industrial manufacturing tech base.
So can we talk about China then? Let's talk about the first of all. Let's talk about the Chinese social credit system.
Yeah.
What is a Chinese social credit system, for those who don't know?
Well, the thing is, I was writing a book. I forgot the name of my own bloody book. And
that means you write too much.
Yeah. And it was called The Last Decade of Freedom.
Okay.
1910 to 1920. And part of that book, we concentrated on the whole social credit system and what it actually meant. And when you were reading parts of it, you thought to yourself, my God. And the thing is that when I was writing it at the time, I got to about 900 pages. And I left it there. And you leave a book and you leave it for a month and you read it again. And then you see things that you didn't see.
Yeah, that's the writing process, yeah.
But the rate of technological advancement has been so shocking that by the time I finished the book, most of it was rendered useless.
Right.
Because with the rise of AI technology and so on and so forth, and its implications for the world that we live in, most of that book, I thought we need to update it. Literally need to be updated on a daily basis. But the social credit system that we have, that the Chinese have, is really a mirror image of as what we have here. You have debts in this country. You're not going to be able to access certain financial instruments. You have debt. Obviously finance and everything else. Like I just said, if you've got certain criminal convictions, you won't be able to access certain jobs. All the social credit system is an advance. Don't you
think it's a bit more Orwellian than that, though? Orwellian.
The whole world has become Orwellian. Yeah, it's not just China. We're pointing out.
Sorry, we're talking about Orwellian. Like, not everyone's read Orwell.
Oh, George Orwell.
Yeah, what does Orwellian mean?
It's just simply a take on the name of the author, Eric Blair, whose pseudonym was George Orwell. And of course, he wrote the famous
1984.
He wrote 1984. He wrote Animal Farm. He wrote a whole load of really tremendous books. But the point that I'm making is that the whole world is Orwellian. The whole world is dystopian. The UK has more cameras than anybody else. The UK, without going through any kind of parliamentary procedure, decided to put face recognition cameras in places like supermarkets.
But that's what China's got.
Well, of course China has that. And what we have done in the West, it's easy to speak about China, but what we have done in the West is ape most of what's going on in China at the moment. Because what's happening is that the infrastructure for absolute totalitarianism has been put in place. And if we ever get a blatant dictator in this country, for example, the way in which some Western leaders will definitely use that machination, that infrastructure to terrorize their people. We saw this with Macron during, not Macron, with, what's Fidel Castro's kid called in Canada? Trudeau.
Oh,
yeah,
you mean
Trudeau.
Justin Trudeau.
Justin Trudeau, yeah. We saw this.
You said Fidel Castro's kid.
Anyway, so the like father, like son.
Right.
So the point that I'm making, we saw the way in which he just closed down bank accounts and so on and so forth. I mean, look, if you look at great content creators like Constantine Kitchen, is it Kitchen? I apologise, if I've mispronounced your name. We found that just recently, the guys who do trigonometry, yeah, really good guys.
Okay.
We've seen recently that you've just closed down their bank account. Well, why have you shut down our bank account? We don't have to tell you. What do you mean you don't have to tell us? Yeah, we shut down your bank account. Had they not been famous guys, especially online, you would never have gotten a reason as to why they shut down your bank account. We saw that in Canada. We've seen that in America. We've seen that over here. It's very easy to point your fingers at China and say, oh, this is what China's doing, and so on and so forth. But we are doing exactly the same thing. The mistake that we make, with the greatest respect, the mistake that we make is believing that China is a separate country. On the surface, of course, it's a separate country, but the whole world seems to all be following the same pattern for some reason. Who's behind it? I don't know. But they seem to be following it. One thing I will tell you is that the Chinese social credit system is insidious for people who fall outside the sphere of it. There's that word again. The sphere of it, if you like. And so, of course, within that Chinese credit system, if you break certain rules, you can lose your driving license. They can deny you access to airplanes. They can ensure that you cannot take buses. So essentially, because of the amount of cameras that they use and that infrastructure that they've built up, they can use that infrastructure to restrict you, from most of the goods and services that many of us take for granted.
Wow.